team. And this would be my opportunity. It was a slow and tedious process, but after several nights' tantrums, I had everything I needed. So in my head, I promise you this was a really good idea. I'd imagined it would sound like an angelic choir of Ralphs, all singing together in wonderful harmony. But what I've created is the stuff of nightmares. There's only really an octave of playable notes. Anything lower has been pitch shifted into oblivion and sounds utterly terrifying. And the higher notes are equally as horrific. But this sweet spot in the middle, well, it's passable, I think. Yeah, maybe it'll sound better in the context of a song. Let's never speak of this again. I did manage to find this kid's toy called the Meowsit keyboard, which claims to be exactly what I was trying to make. And to be honest, it does a better job than I did. But it's very clearly faked. It's just a human in a recording studio impersonating a cat. Meow. I guess this bypasses the problems I encountered, but it's cheating. So in summary, if you want a fake fraudulent human pretending to be something they're not, go for this keyboard, or just open Instagram. But if you want the authentic, feline, albeit slightly nightmarish real thing, then you should record your own cat. Even if the project was a complete disaster, I got to spend some quality time with Ralph. Life is short, even more so for a cat, and I got to spend a few precious days hanging out with my newly acquired best friend, which is time I consider very well spent indeed.
Ralph and Tom, they're my favourite little pussycats. Ralph and Tom, they're my favourite little dudes. Ralph has very fluffy ears and Tom's a long cat. They hope you like their videos and subscribe to
Ball entertained. Really? I promise feeling a little left out. Imagine if that's why he meows at me so much. This whole time he's just been asking me to build him a fort. Well, now I finally am. All it took was a worldwide lockdown. So to make it up to him, I'd try and make it the greatest box fort in the history of catkind. I'd need some cardboard boxes and a glue gun. Pause where I can see 'em, punk. Now, I really did want to build this entirely out of cardboard. Ideally, I'd have used those really thick cardboard tubes as uprights and supports. But because of the lockdown, I just couldn't get hold of any. So instead, I'd have to cheat and build a wooden frame. I know, I'm disappointed in myself too, but I wanted to last and be safe and sturdy for Ralph. So this was realistically my only option. So here's the plan. The castle will be about 1.6 metres tall, 1.2 metres wide, and about 45 centimetres deep. Inside there will be 3 half-length alternating levels, plus a 4th longer top level where Ralph can stretch out and watch over his kingdom. There'll be a few windows dotted around, and of course, it will have a fully functional drawbridge. The first task was to cut out the different levels. I marked them on a sheet of wood, including the protruding bit for the towers, and cut them out. This was a perfect visualization of the castle's footprint, and my first real impression of its size. And already my project manager was checking up on me. Since I couldn't buy any new wood because all the shops are closed, this whole castle would be a mismatch of leftovers from previous projects. Some of the uprights were from an old shoe rack I took apart, and others were offcuts from when I built these 2 units last year. And the main sheets of wood were from when I built my old guinea pigs a run a couple of years ago. Once everything was cut to the correct height, I added battens to the wall, screwed in the surface, and then secured the uprights.
Ooh, the spirit level.
I repeated everything to build the second level, but before I went any further, added a doorstop, because it was only a matter of time before I accidentally sent the whole thing crashing to the ground. And then I added the third level, again securing it to both the batten and uprights. Now I'm going to get Ralph and just check the heights and that he can easily climb between them. I bribed him up with treats, and yeah, so far so good. And then finally, I cut out the top level, the slightly longer one, which I'm hoping will become a favourite sleeping spot of his. This time I attached 2 battens to the wall, and used more pieces of the old shoe rack as uprights. All that was left were the towers, and this is where the lack of wood really became a problem. I only had 2 long uprights, extra side panels from when I built Reggie's bridge. Those 2 pieces would go on the inside of each tower, and at the edges I had to sort of bodge together some shorter pieces using shelf brackets. It's such a hodgepodge mess of shoddy carpentry. And once again, my project manager came in to assess my progress. He somehow failed to notice the massive cat castle, but immediately noticed the tiny doorstop I'd installed. So I put him on the top and bribed him with yet more treats. He left a lovely patch of cat dribble and had a bit of an explore, but decided he was content for now at ground level with some head scratches. So it's the next morning, and it's only now really dawning on me that I'm going to have this massive cat castle in my room forever. The next job was to make a working drawbridge. Now, as a cat owner, I know there's a very high probability that Ralph will never use this thing, so I want to make it as appealing to him as possible. Sometimes he sleeps on hard wooden surfaces, whilst other times he favours soft and squidgy things, such as cushions, beds or me. So I'd include a variety of different textures on the castle's levels, in the hope that he'd like at least one of them. The bottom level I'm going to leave just as wood. This one's going to be covered in fabric, this one's going to be covered in cardboard, and then the top I'm going to carpet. I got this really cool zigzag material free from a shop once, who were giving it away as an old furniture sample. I cut it roughly to size and attached it using a staple gun. Well, that was a plan at least. There was literally 1 staple in there, and I can't even go out and buy more. The lockdown strikes again. Instead, I used some tiny nails to hold it in place, and some glue to seal it under the edge. The next level up would be covered in cardboard, which I again glued in position, and then the top story would be carpeted, with a leftover piece of Ralph's favourite carpet. Now, I know he likes this stuff, so he's got no excuse not to use it. I cut it to size and screwed it in place, again gluing it over the edge. Once again, Ralph came in to investigate, and after dribbling all over the freshly laid carpet, he had a bath on the fabric and a rest on the cardboard. Could it be that I'd actually made something he liked? And then finally, it was time to attach the cardboard. It was pretty boring actually, just a couple of hours measuring and cutting, and then doing it all again because I'd got it wrong the first time. I cut battlements into the top, this typical castle square pattern, and then these sort of church-shaped windows. I deliberately made these off-centre because there were internal wooden beams preventing them from being in the middle. I made sure they were symmetrical to one another at least, but I hated it. I guess I should have just made them central but smaller to begin with, but as a workaround, I cut out some window frames, which I spray painted gold and glued over the top. It fixed the problem, and the gold accent looked kinda cool. I also made a portcullis out of popsicle sticks, you know that gate thing from the 1p coin, which I again painted gold and glued in position. To go with the whole recycled theme of this project, I tried making my own flag out of some leftover fabric and old clothing, but it turns out textiles is not one of my strengths. Instead, I settled on some decidedly easier to make bunting, and attached a real Union Jack to the top, the very same flag I took up the UK's tallest mountain in a previous video. The last thing to do was to name the castle, and I honestly had no idea what to call it, so I put it to you in a poll on the community tab. I really liked Forty McFortface, suggested by Jacob Saxby, the kingdom and land unified under one lord and the lands of the holy castle of Ralph, put forward by Shazam Pop, and my personal favourite, the brilliant Chateau Cateau from the Tim Traveller, one of my favourite YouTube channels. But ultimately Chateau de Ralph won, with a whopping 2/3 of the vote. And to my complete disbelief, Ralph took an immediate interest in his new castle. An interest that lasted precisely 4.5 seconds. 4.5 seconds. I spent 4.5 days building this thing. So this is Chateau de Ralph, the most luxurious cat castle in all the land. And this is Ralph not using it. What do you have to say for yourself, Ralph? This is exactly what Reggie did with his bridge. I think there must be some kind of secret cat code they all adhere to in order to frustrate and bewilder their humans as much as they can. So Ralph is sleeping on this carpet, and not this carpet where there are treats and which has been put there especially for him. Or maybe Ralph's just a lot cleverer than I thought. Maybe he knows that if he completely ignores it, then I'll go to the supermarket and I'll buy one of every type of cat treat they sell in order to bribe him. And then not only will he have his very own castle, but he'll have a bountiful feast to enjoy whilst up there. Whatever his motivations, it worked. Some of the time he thinks he's hiding and that I can't see him. Ralph, the tail's a bit of a giveaway. And other times I genuinely can't see him until he suddenly pops out from one of the windows. There he is. He likes to rub up against and scratch on the cardboard, so I'm sure this castle's gonna have a very limited lifespan. But at least he doesn't hate it. And I made sure he'll remember the forts that came before his. He's sleeping. I think that means he likes it. Now before you go, I want to show you something really cool. See these tiny orange dots in Pretty Litter's cat litter? They work in exactly the same way as litmus paper, indicating pH level. This video is sponsored by Pretty Litter. Last month, I built Ralph the world's greatest cat fort. It's 4 stories tall, including his luxurious carpeted penthouse suite, and even has a working drawbridge. And after completely ignoring it initially, he's become really quite fond of his castle. But the high life has gone straight to his fluffy little head. Ralph thinks he's royalty, and admittedly, I guess I sort of treat him like royalty, waiting on him hand and paw. He has legions of adoring fans who send him literally hundreds of drawings and letters, and he's even started only eating gourmet cat food. I'm serious. A few weeks ago I ran out of his normal food, and the expensive stuff was all the shop had left, and since tasting it, he flat out refuses to eat anything else. Thousands of years ago, the ancient Egyptians worshipped cats, and I guess his castle is a monument to just how little times have changed. And I've got to admit, Ralph is pretty adorable and undeniably regal. Ralph, I'm trying to show everyone how regal you are. Well, most of the time. So today, I want to set up an overly elaborate photo shoot to take his royal portrait. If you enjoy this video, please consider subscribing. It makes Ralph and me very happy. For inspiration, I look no further than the human royal family. After examining countless royal portraits, I made the following 3 observations. Number 1, they're usually sat on some kind of incredibly ornate chair or sofa. Number 2, there's often this fancy damask pattern wallpaper, sometimes it even matches the sofa. And number 3, there's lots of gold. On the sofas, around the wallpaper, just lots of it. So whilst real gold is just a tiny bit outside my price range, I could probably get my hands on some gold paint at least, and the posh wallpaper shouldn't be too difficult to find either. The real challenge would be the sofa. Whilst there are companies that specialise in eccentric pet furniture, as you can imagine, they are insanely expensive. And if you've ever had a cat, you'll know just how stubborn they can be, rarely using the beds or toys you buy for them. So I couldn't really justify spending hundreds of pounds on a sofa Ralph would likely never use. Instead, I did the next best thing and bought a cardboard one. At least Ralph seemed to like it, but it wasn't exactly the look I was going for. I was back to square one. But then, after several weeks trawling the internet, Ralph found a second-hand cat-sized Chez Lounge newly listed on eBay, which he eagerly snapped up for a very reasonable price. And 10 days later, it arrived. Good afternoon, I've got a package from Mr. Ralph. Now I should mention, it is broken. 2 of the legs are very wobbly, and one has entirely fallen off. But I knew this when I bought it, and it's nothing I shouldn't be able to fix. I took the legs off, sanded them down, and spray painted them gold. I figured the easiest way to reattach them would be using some additional strips of wood, which I cut to size. By doing it this way, I could screw down into each leg and then screw up into the Shaylonge itself. Finally, I touched up the paintwork where I'd been a little overzealous with the glue. Good as new, but as could only be expected, Ralph was far more interested in the box it came in. I don't know why I'm even surprised anymore. Next, it was time for the background. I endured the horrifically long queue at the hardware store, but managed to find everything I needed easily enough. I bought some wallpaper, some foam boards, these wood effect vinyl floor tiles, a skirting board, and some long strips of wood. I used the foam boards as a backdrop, attached together using the wood. It didn't really seem worth the effort of properly pasting the wallpaper, so instead I used double-sided sticky tape to hold it in place. I mean, it doesn't need to last or look good long term, so I should get away with it. And peeling all the tape was incredibly satisfying. I even impressed myself with how I managed to seamlessly line up each sheet. I really thought I was going to mess this up, so I'm delighted with how it looks. Next, I attached the fake wooden floorboards to more foam boards, cutting them to size where necessary. They were self-adhesive, which made the whole process super easy. And lastly, I cut the skirting board to size and painted it white, and once it had dried, used hot glue to attach it to the backdrop. As a finishing touch, I added a houseplant in a pot which I yet again spray painted gold. How cool does this look? What always amazes me about the magic of photography is that this was just a hastily cobbled together set in my bedroom. But once you crop out the surroundings with the framing of the camera, you're transported to a luxurious cat-sized palace. It looked magnificent, and it was about to look even more so. What do you think, Ralph? He certainly seemed to like the backdrop. And then, much to my surprise, well, this happened. Ralph genuinely loved his Shaylonge. I didn't even need to bribe him with treats. It was everything I'd imagined. He looked glorious. You know how on school photo day, you have to take a boring, serious photo, and then another where you get to pull a funny face? Well, this is where the catnip came in, and out came the crazy. Ralph just seemed to love the camera, and I got tons of amazing royal portraits, as well as some that weren't quite as royal. I put loads of pictures of Ralph up on Instagram, @HalfAsleepChris, so make sure to head over there if you want to see more of him. And it would absolutely make my day if you took a royal portrait of your own cat. Tag me on Instagram if you do, and I'll include the best ones in the next cat video. Since Ralph lives in a castle and only eats the finest gourmet cat food, it's only fitting that he uses Pretty Litter, the greatest cat litter in all the land. Pretty Litter changes colour with the pH level of your cat's urine to indicate... Wake up, sleepyhead, it's moving day. Today was the big day. Ralph and I were moving out of my parents' house and into our own, along with my girlfriend Danielle and her cat Bella. After losing his... Today was the big day. Ralph and I were moving out of my parents' house and into our own, along with my girlfriend Danielle and her cat Bella. After losing his brother Tom at the end of the year, Ralph was clearly yearning for a friend, but Bella, maybe not so much. You may remember her from the fox video where she very casually sent a family of foxes running for the hills. She's 11, and Danielle's had her since she was just a tiny little kitten. Bella even had kittens herself when she was 2, none of which looked anything like her. But they all found new homes and she's since been spayed. And ever since, Bella's been living as the only cat in the household, so she's in for a bit of a shock when she meets Ralph. Ralph meowed every 2 or 3 seconds for the whole journey. It's okay, buddy. And then he meowed some more when I let him out again. For the first few days, he'd be confined to just one room. he'd likely be very overwhelmed by a completely new everything, so the idea was to get him used to his own little safe space first, before then introducing him to the rest of the house, and then Bella. All that meowing and he's tired himself out. She was next door in her own room. And as predicted, both cats were pretty daunted by everything. And I guess we were too. This whole moving house thing was a pretty big deal. To just uproot yourself like a carrot and plant yourself into an entirely new vegetable patch. It was pretty overwhelming. I'm not normally a frivolous person, but there was so much stuff we needed to buy. And most of it wasn't even exciting stuff. Just things like doormats, bins, plates and bowls. All those delightfully boring things. And then there were the bills. Electricity, water, gas, internet, regular cat food, gourmet cat food. But after a few days, everything settled down, and so did Ralph and Bella. They were both fully relaxed and accustomed to their rooms, so it was finally time for them to meet. The idea was to introduce them to a new space at the same time, a room neither cat was familiar with or believed to be their territory. We also installed a pet gate to enable them to see each other face to face without the risk of attacking each other. So Bella's going in the dining room with Danielle, and I'm going to put the gate across and go and get Ralph. Ralph. Hey buddy, it's time to go and meet Bella. Now, it's perfectly normal and expected for new cats to hiss at one another. They sort of need to get all the look how tough I am stuff out the way before any friendship can begin. It was actually the first time I've ever seen Ralph hiss. And it's amazing how evil it makes their faces look. But then Ralph and Bella seemed to settle down, trying to hide from one another. Danielle got Bella playing with a toy, whilst Ralph just sat there grumpily. So I tried another tactic, the key to Ralph's heart, treats. Eventually Ralph started playing with his favourite toy. In fact, the only toy he's ever really played with, a catnip-filled pillow which someone very kindly sent him. But both cats seemed thoroughly disinterested in each other, and that's the way it continued for the next week. A few times a day, we'd get each cat in the room with the pet gate, and slowly they became more curious, staring at each other from a safe distance. And then for basically a month, nothing happened. We let both cats have the run of the whole house together, and were only separated when we went out. But frustratingly, they managed to consciously avoid each other this entire time. Seriously, they hardly ever came into contact. Fast forward another few weeks to now, and they're slowly getting used to each other. They started feeling comfortable enough to sleep in the same room together, which was an enormous step. And then this happened. And since then, Bella's obviously realised that Ralph doesn't want to eat her or anything, because they've even started sleeping on the same bed. Isn't that adorable? I mean, Ralph really wants to be friends, and Bella's still not entirely convinced yet, but this is looking incredibly promising. There is the occasional spat every now and then, but it's usually just Ralph spooking Bella and trying to get her to play. She's having none of it, but he can be pretty persistent. It's not all Ralph though. Sometimes Bella starts to play and they chase each other all over the house. Ralph's a bit quicker than Bella and she tends to sort of give up halfway, but it's really wonderful to see. And that's where we're at now. Ralph and Bella aren't exactly friends by any stretch of the imagination, but they do play together and tolerate each other enough to sleep on the same bed. And that's a really fantastic start. Now, before I wrap this video up, I've been inundated with comments and messages asking what will happen to Chateau de Ralph now that I've moved out. Well, I'm leaving it behind because it's got a new resident. Meet Coco, my parents' new kitten. She's 12 weeks old and was rescued by the same charity who rescued Ralph and Tom. She's friendly and cuddly and curious and playful, and just a wonderful bundle of joy and happiness with an incredibly loud purr. She's got mighty big boots to fill, but I'm sure she'll keep my parents on their toes now that Ralph and I have left. Plus, George will be delighted to have a new friend to share food with. I guess I'll just have to build Ralph and Bella a new fort, or perhaps an entire city. So it's finally time to announce the winners of last week's giveaway. Well done to everyone who correctly Ever since the dawn of the internet, cats have been amusing us with their adorable and absurd antics, so it's no surprise that they've pretty much taken over. Even here on my own channel, cat videos account for almost half of my views. So in this video, I'm going to pay homage to that and recreate some of the all-time greatest cat memes. If you enjoy it, please consider subscribing. It makes Ralph and Bella very happy. Let's start with Money Cat. In the 80s and 90s, it became popular for gangster rappers to flaunt the cash in photo shoots and music videos. And then when social media happened and profile pictures became a thing, naturally all the wannabe gangsters and rappers tried to imitate it, with unintentionally hilarious results. And in response, Money Cat was born, a feline parody of these imposters. It simply involves a cat with a large amount of cash. To recreate it, we'd need some fat stacks of Benjamins. Luckily, unlike those wannabes, I'm a millionaire YouTuber who just so happens to have a spare 50 grand I've been using as a doorstop. I'm kidding, of course. This is prop money, sold for use in film or television. But Ralph doesn't know that, and all of you watching at home don't know. Oops. Anyway, with 500 totally legitimate $100 bills and a $1 million idea, it was time to transform Ralph into the ultimate money cat. I spread the bills messily on the floor, before stacking a neater sort of fan around the outside. As every cat owner very well knows, cats just can't resist a chance to sit on something they think they're not supposed to, so I had a very easy job for this shot. That right there is 30 grand. If only it was real. And Ralph looked magnificent. But we can do better than that. This is a cat-sized silver chain, and these are cat-sized sunglasses. Brace yourself to see the most gangster cat you have ever seen. The only thing more gangster was what he did next. Next it was Bella's turn, and I didn't just want to do the same again, so this time incorporated the Chez Lounge, Ralph's sofa that Bella since claimed as her own. I lined it with $100 bills, and once again gave Bella a cat-sized chain and sunglasses. Now Bella's actually got a remarkably flat face, without a protruding nose or mouth the way most cats do, so the sunglasses didn't really have anywhere to sit and therefore just wouldn't stay on. And the one time we did get them to stay on, well, I'm pretty sure we broke her. We only really got one good shot, and she sort of looked like a librarian, albeit a very gangster one. I did also buy a cash gun in the hopes of making it rain for some of the shots, but let's just say the cats weren't most fond of the noise it made. I feel like such a bad cat owner right now. Bella won't come out from under the bed. Luckily it's got a reverse function which made the cleanup super easy. Okay, so this next meme is a weird one, and it's more of a bizarre internet trend. It's called Bread Cat, and it's exactly what it sounds like. You put a slice of bread on a cat. I volunteered Bella since she looks a lot like a loaf of tiger bread, and for a good few months now that's actually been her nickname. She tucks her arms and legs in and just sits there one big stripy mass, and she looks so much like a loaf of bread that sometimes I can't even tell if it's her or not. I mean, is this Bella? How about this one? Or this? Surely this one's got to be her. Wait, what? There's two of you. But if you're Bella, then who on earth is that? So once I was 60% sure I had the right cat, it was time to put a slice of bread on her. There's a sentence I never thought I'd say. I think we broke her again. And just for good measure, we put a slice of bread on Ralph too. I've never seen him look so grumpy. And then he tried to eat it. Don't ever change, Ralph. So lastly, it's time for the video's grand finale, Chemistry Cat. This meme sees a cat wearing a bow tie and glasses in front of a chalkboard and surrounded by beakers and test tubes. It's usually accompanied by some sort of science or cat pun. Now it turns out it's incredibly hard to get hold of a chalkboard in this day and age, let alone one that's both large enough and green. So it was on to plan B. I built a backdrop out of some wood and foam boards, exactly as I did in the Royal Portrait video, screwing each board firmly into position. Next I used wood effect adhesive vinyl to create the orangey wooden wall from the original meme, careful to smooth out any air bubbles and achieve an even finish. And for the chalkboard, I'd simply be using dark green card. I drew on the card first before sticking it on, roughly recreating the scribbles from the chalkboard in the meme, some vague nonsensical equations involving cheese, milk and mice. Once that was all done, I used double-sided sticky tape to fix it to the backdrop, and cut off the excess from the top. It's looking pretty good so far. For the tabletop, I'd be using a black foam board, atop shoeboxes to give it some height. I matched the chemistry equipment from the meme as closely as possible, which I then filled with water and food colouring, before getting an A5 yellow notepad and a pencil, which I sharpened down to size. Finally, I positioned everything accordingly. All that remained was to dress Ralph in a bow tie and glasses, which I spray painted white. Unfortunately, I couldn't get him to wear the glasses. They were too big and kept falling off. But he looked pretty dapper otherwise, and using some treats as encouragement, we got the perfect shot. Bella looked similarly dapper in the bow tie, and we didn't even bother trying the glasses. There's just something about Bella's facial expressions. She's just so, well, expressive. There's shocked, grumpy, derpy, disinterested, mid-head shake, and then this one, which says if you ever try to put a bow tie on me again, I'll scratch your face off. Now as for the caption part of this meme, I'm gonna leave it up to you. Comment your suggestions, making sure they include a science or cat pun, or even both, and I'll post my favourites on Instagram over the next few days, @HalfAsleepChris. But for now, after a long day flaunting the cash, becoming style icons, and doing some serious science, Ralph and Bella had worn themselves out and settled down together for a well-deserved nap. I built the world's greatest cat fort. But Ralph and I have since moved out of my parents' house, and he's been left decidedly castle-less. And though he's got a new friend, Bella, he's struggling to adapt to life without a luxury palace. He's been bugging me constantly to build him a new one. And so I'm finally giving in, but with some conditions. Number 1, the castle has got to be entirely made out of cardboard. Chateau de Ralph had a wooden frame, so it wasn't really a box fort at all, rather a wooden castle with cardboard cladding, and that really bugged me, so this time it's got to be entirely cardboard. And number 2, it's got to be so big that I can use it as a human fort too, because who doesn't love box forts? So how do you go about building something of that size entirely out of cardboard? Well, I found these cardboard bricks online that slot together, sort of like cardboard Lego. This isn't sponsored, I've had no contact or affiliation with the people who make them, but these bricks are perfect. Or nearly perfect. The trouble is, they come flat pack, and the go big or go home approach I was taking meant that I had 800 of them to assemble. 800! It took about 12 hours, and by the end of it, my hands were completely covered in paper cuts. But I didn't care about that, for it was only now that I truly realised the potential of these 800 chunks of cardboard. This is gonna be the funnest day of my life. I got started right away, using the rug as an approximate footprint for the castle, although making sure the 2 towers that would be on either side protruded slightly, and leaving a gap for what would be the doorway. Thanks to the bricks just slotting together, I made incredibly quick progress, and before I knew it, the fort was already knee-height. The doorway was a little more challenging. I had to build above first and then fill in the gaps from below to hold it all together. And my plants were constantly getting in the way. Soon it got tall enough that I could only just climb over the walls. It was time to test out the doorway. I made it!
Yes. Oh.
Already, it was enormous, and I was only about halfway. It now occurred to me that I should probably include a window on either side. I made a small lip out of outward-facing bricks and doubled them up underneath. So sort of ruined the nice perfect brick pattern, but it's a really sturdy windowsill, and I've done the same on the other side. Before I could continue though, my project managers decided to check on my progress. Bella was first and seemed less than impressed, preferring to sit under the Christmas tree instead. Some trees tempted her inside, but only briefly. Ralph, however, was much more approving, gladly hoovering up the treats Bella had left behind. He sat down for a minute or two, inspecting my building work, before joining Bella back on the bed, and so I wasted no time getting to work on the rest of the castle. So that's it, we've used up all the ordinary sized bricks. It's looking pretty good. This is me stood on my tiptoes, so it's actually slightly taller than me. And then each tower, well, they're quite a lot taller than me. Bloody hell, from the outside it's enormous. I can't even fit it all in one shot. That's huge. Obviously I know this is the size of my living room, but this is the first time I'm really getting that realisation. So after using up all the regular sized bricks, next I use the single bricks to create battlements, that little square pattern often found at the top of castles. This is it, the very final brick. It's done. And then it was finished, structurally at least. In the morning, I decorate it with flags and banners and all that wonderful stuff, but for now I needed some sleep. I set up some motion-censored night vision cameras to see if either of the cats were brave enough to explore overnight. Ralph is first to enter, noticing one of the cameras straight away. Bella follows, although she doesn't enter the castle. The camera cuts out, but when it's triggered again, you can just make out her tail sneaking away to steal Ralph's food. A few minutes later, she returns and has a little sit, completely ignoring the castle once more, before disappearing back upstairs. Ralph, however, spends most of the night in the castle. He doesn't sleep, but spends the time bathing, scratching it, and wondering what on earth the cameras are, over and over again. At one point, he even gets hyper and pounces on something. Just look at that butt wiggle. Here it is from the other angle. And then he's hyper, which is bad news for Bella, who's hungry again. On her way back, he pounces, and she retreats upstairs. And then soon I can be seen wiggling through the doorway in my pyjamas to turn off the cameras. So Ralph seems to like the castle, but Bella's completely disinterested. Maybe she'll warm to it if I make a flag with her face on. I made a banner for either side out of card, and cut out to paper Ralph and paper Bella to stick on each one, as well as their names in a medieval-looking font. As for the castle's name, I asked for your suggestions on my community tab, and then put the most popular ones in a poll. The runner-up was Boxingham Palace, which I might have stolen from The Simpsons, and by far the winner, suggested by Arjun Armin, was the Royal Feline Residence of Raphael and Isabella. Now that's a few too many paper letters for me to cut out, so I'm going to combine the two. I cut out Boxingham Palace in the same medieval font as the banners, but cheated and used stickers for the rest of it. All that was left was a few additions to the interior. I'd always wanted to put Ralph's chaise lounge in his old castle, but it just wasn't big enough. Well, that was no longer a problem with this giant of a new one. I just had to try and squeeze it through the doorway. I added a silver platter as a food tray fit for royalty, and as a finishing touch I added an art print which is available at halfasleepchris.com. Yup, that's a not-so-subtle merch plug. I'm also selling colouring books, plectrums, temporary tattoos and more. Go check it out, the link is in the description. But enough of that, it was time to formally open Boxingham Palace. May I cordially introduce you to Her Majesty, the Queen of Boxinghamshire. I was surprised to see that Bella absolutely loved the castle, probably because the chaise lounge was in there. And then His Majesty, the King of Boxinghamshire, decided to make an appearance too. He was once again inspecting the quality of my work, and judging by the way he rubbed his face on it, I'd say he was happy. and he soon discovered how fun it could be to jump out the windows. Bella followed suit out of the other window, whilst Ralph jumped back in and had a bit more of an explore, before once again leaving through the window. I really needn't have bothered building a door. Bella eventually found the food and had a royal-sized feast, whilst Ralph posed regally as though he was getting his portrait taken. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. What if we ever come under attack from enemy cats who wish to claim Boxingham Palace as their own? Well, Bella's got that covered with her very own cardboard tank. On second thoughts, maybe don't attack us, please. But the one who enjoyed the castle most of all was undoubtedly me. I mean, I got to live out every child's dream and turn their living room into the ultimate box fort. And I guess the fact that the cats liked it too was just an added bonus. Last week, I built Ralph and Bella a gigantic cat castle, the size of my living room. I made it with these super cool cardboard bricks that slot together, essentially cardboard Lego. But unfortunately, the castle couldn't stay up forever. I kept the banners and put them up on the wall, and even built Ralph a smaller fort that can stay. But now I'm left with 760 cardboard bricks, and a once again spacious and open living room. Well, not for long. My sincere apologies to Danielle, who really wanted the living room back. I want to build a cat maze. In fact, 3 cat mazes in 3 difficulty levels. The first will be incredibly basic just to get the cats used to it, right up to the final boss maze, which will be as large as a room will allow, with long corridors and several dead ends and false turns. And then we'd pit the cats against one another, in a brutal fight to the death, finish line. Now, I'm gonna say something which you might think is me just being mean, but you'll learn for yourself over the course of this video. Ralph and Bella aren't very bright. I love them completely, but they're not exactly the smartest cats in the world. So as I got to work building the first maze, I wanted to keep it painfully simple, so hopefully they wouldn't be able to embarrass themselves too much. Once again, I just want to reiterate I love my cats, and I really do apologise if this video just ends up being me roasting them for 10 minutes straight. One very blurry time-lapse later, and the first maze was finished. So here it is, maze number 1. Very simply, the cats enter at the back and follow it round the corner, then have a single decision, right to a dead end or left to the finish line. Simple, right? Oh, and let's go over the rules. Anything goes except leaving the maze. You'll notice that it's not very tall because I still want to be able to film over the top, but it means the cats can easily jump over the walls. If they jump over the internal walls, we'll just call it a creative strategy, but if they jump the external walls and leave the maze, they'll be disqualified from the round. And to clarify, the finish line counts as a bowl of treats at the end. Bella, these are for after you finish the maze. So with all that said, it was time for our first contestant. Ralph has been taking this whole thing very seriously. He's even been studying for the last few days, tweaking his strategy and making sure he's as ready as can be. But will it be enough to beat Bella? And he's off to an incredibly promising start, ignoring the dead end and heading straight towards the finish line with certainty. But what's this? I don't believe my eyes. He's bottled it. The pressure's all got too much for his fluffy little head and he's sat down, just centimetres from the finish line. In all my seconds commentating cat mazes, I've never seen anything quite like this. This really is one for the history books. And he waited, and he waited, and he waited, before finally making a sprint finish and enjoying his feast in a time of 45 seconds. Well, that was certainly something. Let's see if Bella can do better. Rather than studying, Bella's been taking a different approach to preparation, instead trying to make sure she's as rested as possible for the big day, and sleeping even more than usual. And who knows, Ralph started out strong but got tired, so maybe all that extra sleep will give Bella the advantage. Our second contestant has just entered the arena, and after a brief headshake makes her way to the first and only junction. And she can't seem to make up her mind. One way leads to eternal doom and the other eternal victory, and it's clearly a thought that's weighing heavily on Bella, who's still struggling to decide. Bella's technique was clearly a very thought out one, and she eventually made her way to the exit to enjoy her treats. So let's take a look at the scoreboard. Bella emerges victorious in a stunning time of 35 seconds. I guess slow and steady really does win the race. But with 2 rounds to go, it's still all to play for. So Maze 2 is all finished. Maze 2 now sees 2 dead ends, this first short one, and this other deceptively long corridor with a dead end around the corner. The correct path is still fairly simple, straight down the middle, but will the two false paths be enough to catch either cat out? Contestant 1 enters fast and immediately makes a break for victory. Heavens above, he's only gone and made it! There's no hesitation at all, just a beeline for glory. That really is a magnificent performance and a breathtaking time of merely 4 seconds. 4 seconds? And he was so in the zone that he didn't even notice the treats. Surely Bella doesn't stand a chance. Contestant 2 enters and the arena door is closed behind her. Her first few steps look hopeful, but again she seems to be pausing and thinking. And this time, just 5 seconds in, her thoughtful approach has already cost her the round. Okay, I'm gonna speed things up a bit. Over a minute later, Bella's made up her mind but heads down the wrong path. Once again, she takes her time, looking around and sniffing the cardboard. Maybe she's accepted defeat and so is simply enjoying the craftsmanship of this beautifully constructed stadium. Eventually she turns around and takes the other wrong path, before stopping by the entrance and proceeding to take the first wrong path again. Oh Bella. At this point, our interference didn't really matter, so I laid down a trail of treats to try and lead her to the finish line. With her time in tatters, can Bella follow the delicious snacks to the finish line? Evidently not. Hell's bells, she jumps! Contestant 2 has left the maze and is thereby disqualified. I repeat, Bella has been disqualified. You can't put her back in, she's been disqualified. This really is unprecedented. Bella's coach has re-entered her into the maze, defying all Maze Association rules. This really will cost them dearly at the judges' table. And even with the additional help, after a shocking time of 13 minutes, Bella failed to finish. This has been a most remarkable comeback for Contestant 1, finishing in a time of 4 seconds, almost 200 times faster than Contestant 2. Wow, what a round! I will surely be telling my grandchildren about this day. Everything comes down to Maze 3, and this time it's a lot more difficult. It'll probably be Christmas before Bella finishes. Oh, wait. This time the entrance is on the right, and after rounding a corner, there are 4 possible directions. Left to a dead end, right to a dead end, straight on to a dead end, or straight and right to victory. This single path then snakes round all the way to the finish line with no further obstacles. But will the cats be confident enough to follow it around several twists and turns? This time we're going to let Bella go first. And remember, it's currently a draw. This round is a decider. And this time the stakes are higher too. At the finish line, Bella has some pure chicken breast and Ralph a whole tuna loin. I mean, they get their rewards either way, but let's just pretend the stakes are higher. Contestant 2 has entered the maze for the final time, and after last round's disqualification, she'll be looking to make up some ground. She pauses and sits down. Did she not learn anything from the previous round? It really makes you wonder just what on earth her coach said to her in the changing room team talk. After a solid 60 seconds, Bella goes right, but right's wrong. And just when I thought this whole debacle couldn't get any more controversial, Bella's coach appears to be guiding the way with her favourite toy. And she's encouraging her to bypass the long corridor and instead jump the internal walls. This contestant certainly has a history jumping walls, but will the jump this time be a legal one? Good lord, she's destroying the stadium. I don't know what to say. They don't prepare you for this in Commentator Academy. But what's this? A devilishly handsome chap in a blue shirt is leaning in and repairing the damage. My, what a good-looking fellow. It was clear that Bella didn't stand a chance on her own, so Danielle kept trying to get her to jump the internal wall with the toy. You now rejoin me 8 minutes into the final round, and Bella's somewhat awkward landing has landed her on the correct path. All she must do now is follow it round the corner to finally put us out of our misery. And she's going for it, chasing after the feathery toy with remarkable speed for such a chonker. She hesitates at the final corner. Can she see this through to the finish? Yes, she most definitely can. Bella has completed the maze in a time of 8.5 minutes precisely. And in all the excitement, I'd actually forgotten to put any treats in her bowl. By the time I filled it back up, she was back exploring the maze, probably wondering where her reward was. Now it was Ralph's turn, and 8.5 minutes was the time to beat. Contestant 1 is off and appears to have an advantage. He can quite literally smell the finish line. That tuna is some very potent stuff, and this fluffy boy is using his nose to guide the way, but it leads him straight into the first dead end. The feast is just the other side of the wall, and he can smell it so close and yet so very far. Now this was actually really interesting to watch. I know I've spent much of this video laughing at how silly my cats can be, but we were watching Ralph problem solve now, and logically tried to figure out how to get to that incredibly smelly tuna. He ventures further into the maze, still using that snout of his as a compass, but the needle is pointing decisively back to where he just was. It makes you question, will this in fact be an advantage or indeed his downfall? With just over a minute now elapsed on the clock, there is still everything to play for. But then, as if by some magical power granted by sheer will and determination, he turns, ignoring the dead ends and heading straight for glory. Ralph marches forward with such decisiveness that you have to wonder if his coach has slipped him a map. He pauses every few seconds to sniff the air, but this is looking exceptionally promising. He rounds the penultimate corner, making sure to smell everything, including the maze side camera, and turns onto the home straight. He can physically see the tuner now, and he's done it. Ralph has reached the finish line in an impressive 1 minute 48 seconds, far ahead of Bella's time and securing himself the round, the championship and eternal glory. This really has been one for the ages. There will be books written about this monumental day. So Ralph won. Here he is with his tiny little trophy. Admittedly, he had the enormous advantage of being able to smell the finish line. But believe it or not, Bella's actually allergic to fish, so we couldn't give her tuna too. Anyway, I'll see you all next year. Merry Christmas. Hello? It's for you, Bella. It's a cat called. There we go. I finally finished this model of the Mars rover. Be careful, Ralph. Don't get too close. Curiosity kills cats. Both my cats are really intense. Bella, get away from there. Bella keeps leaving me presents in my slippers. Oh, it's a mouse. Ralph can't make up his mind about this important business decision, so he's going to sleep on it. So there's a tiger loaf. There's a bloomer. There's a farmhouse loaf. And then a Bella loaf. Well, I guess the cat's out the bag. Although Bella might be purebred, I think Ralph's inbred. Seriously though, this isn't even remotely funny.